Hey, what's up guys? Reefing ain't easy, and neither is fully automating your fish tank. I would actually say that the only truly way to fully automate would be to pay somebody else to come in and service, maintain your tank on a regular basis. Now, even then, I would say it's not fully automated. What I mean by that is something drastic could happen, like your return pump stops working for whatever reason, and you need to drop everything and handle that situation right away. Otherwise, fairly quickly, you could lose a lot of the life forms in your tank. That's why I would say it's never completely fully automated. Okay, so that kind of stuff aside, let's say nothing unexpected happens, which if you've been in the reefing hobby very long, you know that that's just not realistic. A lot of unexpected things happen, but let's put that to the side. I would say it is feasible to get your tank to a point where you would need to have 1 day a month to work on your tank. You know, call it a tank day where you're doing maintenance that just comes up. So in that case, you would definitely need to clean the glass. And then periodically, not every single month, but you're gonna have to clean out some pumps, maybe refill some food, or if you're running some kind of GFO or carbon or something of that nature. So I wanted to cover some specific topics and explain how to automate those, and then just give my personal opinion. If you wanna automate your tank, which ones are most important, which order I would do that in, and why. So I'm going to cover flow, light, food, dosing, filtration, testing, water changes, and general cleaning. So first, let's start with flow. You can almost argue that is always automated, in the sense that you're going to put in some kind of electronic pump, plug it in, and it's going to push water, and there you go, it's automated. Now you can get wave makers that are going to turn them on and off for certain cycles, or a lot of the pumps nowadays, like these Ecotech Marines, come programmable to where you can run different kinds of cycles for different kinds of days. You know, it can be nice and steady during the evening at a low flow, where in the afternoon it's kind of random and a lot more higher intensity, that sort of thing. But we're gonna go ahead and say that that's usually always automated, and you don't really need to worry about that. But I did just want to quickly mention that, you know, there is different levels of flow automation out there. Putting that aside, something that I think is the most important thing to automate, and I would almost say you should definitely do no matter what, is your lighting. Now you can buy lighting, pretty cost effective, but a lot of times it has an on-off switch. And if you are thinking you are going to turn it off and on every single day on a very strict routine schedule, that is going to be extremely difficult. You know, I don't know too many people that are responsible enough to stick to the schedule, remember to do it, and not mess it up. And if you know much about this hobby, you want to create a good stability for your life forms in your tank. You know, in the nature and the real world, the sun is going to rise every day on time. It's not going to vary and show up 2 hours late one day or something like that. Now, depending on the lights you have, it could be as simple as just installing a timer on an outlet to turn them on and off, or a lot of the newer lights today are programmable. There's obviously a lot of different variation in how much you can automate that. I really like these Ecotech Marines. Something that was nice is I wanted to increase the amount of par in my tank, and they actually have a feature to where you can say, hey, I want it here and I'm right here, slowly increment it up to this spot here over the course of, say, a 4-week period or something. Now the next category you could argue is just dosing, because when you add food to your tank, technically you're dosing your tank with food. You could argue when you top off your tank with fresh water, as the water evaporates and leaves the salt behind, that auto top off is dosing your tank with fresh water. You could argue that just doing a 10% water change, you're technically dosing your tank with new water that could contain micro and macro nutrients in them. So if I wanted to be extremely broad and put it in one category, I would say dosing. But let's first start with your automatic top off. I think that is the best place to start if you're going to automate something related to dosing. And when I say automate, there's 2 levels of automation when it comes to your auto top off. The first one is that it automatically tops off your tank. But the second one is that your auto top off reservoir that's going to hold the water gets refilled automatically. And in my opinion, that's the more important one, because it might be easy for 1 or 2 weeks, maybe even 3 or 4 months, but eventually it turns into work and something that's likely to be forgotten to refill the reservoir. And again, usually it's not going to be a huge deal. You're going to notice something like maybe your return pump starts sucking air, but it is going to be a salinity instability within your tank, which could hinder growth or health. So for me, I use the Toonsy Auto Top Off. It's been working great. It does wonderful. It keeps my water level at a very consistent point, because what happens is water evaporates and then it adds water to bring it back up to that level. But then I did purchase this little gadget that was extremely helpful. I actually have coming through the ceiling an RODI line that's tied to my RODI filter. So when the reservoir empties to a particular sensor, it triggers the solenoid, opens up the valve, and then filtered water fills up the reservoir until it hits the other sensor, turning it off. So I don't have to remember to fill up that reservoir, which for me was a really important piece of automation. So now I don't have to tend to it every 3 or 4 days, making sure that that's full and looking out for that. It's just something I no longer have to worry about. Now the next one in terms of dosing would be an automatic feeder. It adds stability to your tank to where you're getting same time every single day, same amount of food, that consistency. It helps you dial in the amount of food your tank needs to feed all the life forms in it, but not overfeed to the point where you're growing nuisance algae or something of that matter. And this is really easy to implement. They offer a lot of different automatic feeders. Because I'm invested in the Neptune Apex, I went ahead and got their automatic feeder because you can tie it in with other things on your tank. But I would definitely recommend getting that for automation. But at the same time, I feed frozen food periodically, kind of when I feel like it, when I think the tank can use it, and I can still get that enjoyment out of it. But I know I can go on vacation, everything's going to be fed, just make sure that has enough food in there to last, and everything should be okay. All right, after that, getting away from the dosing thing, we'll come back to that in a minute with some other automation. I would definitely recommend trying to automate your filtration as much as possible. So if you're running your skimmer, that skimmer cup is going to get filled and you're going to have to empty and clean that out. However, most skimmers will have a little chute at the bottom of the cup where you can hook up usually a 3/8 inch tubing and have another reservoir, as you can see here that I have, and you can even get a bigger one. That way, as the cup fills up, it's going to drain into the reservoir, making it so that you don't have to change or clean out your skimmer as often, getting you to that month period. Now to take it a step further, that just makes it so that I don't have to clean my skimmer and I can let it run even longer, is I got a auto neck cleaner for my skimmer, which is basically like a squeegee, and I have it set up like every 6 or 12 hours. It rotates and cleans the throat of my skimmer, making sure that it is operating at a consistent efficiency, as well as limiting how often I have to clean it. You know, I can actually let it go multiple months without having to clean or maintain that. Usually I'll empty this container 2 or 3 times before I actually clean out the skimmer. Now another kind of filtration that's popular is like a refugium or an algae scrubber. And I used to actually have a refugium with Chaeto, which wasn't too bad because every so often you just pull out some of the Chaeto, throw it away. However, I didn't like the maintenance with that because when you have a light down there growing that algae, other things tend to grow too, and I just found I didn't need it. And getting rid of that, although it's not truly automation, was very helpful for me with just keeping things clean, and I don't have to clean my sump very often. I also put pumps in my sump to make sure the water is always constantly moving to keep things off the bottom, like detritus, and it's made it so I don't have to clean my sump very often at all. It also helps if you happen to be dosing alkalinity and calcium. It prevents any kind of precipitation. So although I wouldn't call that like filtration per se, those are just some other helpful hints and tips to reduce the amount of maintenance you need, and possibly you could argue is a form of automation. But let's talk about actual mechanical filtration in the sense of filter socks, filter pads, that sort of thing. Now, the ultimate, I think, would be some kind of Clarisy filter or roller mat, where it's basically, there's a big full spool here and an empty spool here, and the cleaning substrate rolls from one to the other, and it's cleaning in the middle, filtrating the water. As it gets dirty, it pulls a little bit more out. One of the biggest reasons I don't have it is, in order to install, the one I was looking at was the Clarisy filter. It seemed like quite a bit of work within my sump, but I just wanted to mention, I think that's probably gonna be your best bet for fully automating your tank. What I actually did was I 3D printed this cage. I sell it on my website. I'll put the link in the description. But I basically just buy these super cheap filter felts, which is the same thing that the filter socks are made out of. And just like filter socks, I basically just swap out that filter felt when it gets dirty and clogged up. But where it saves me time with automation is really the fact that I'm not worried about saving my filter socks and cleaning them out to reuse them, because those things are like $4 to $6 a pop and they add up over time. And that's a really big chore, at least it was for me, to clean those out, because I didn't really like cleaning them in my washer machine, where these 9x12 filter felts are about 16 cents a piece, so I really don't feel guilty or bad about throwing them away, and it just saves a lot of time. I would say it takes a little bit longer to actually change it, because you could just pull a sock out, put a new sock in, but then the extra time of storing that sock in like a 5-gallon bucket and coming back later and cleaning it, that's where I'm saving time, just throwing it away. I've tried other methods, like having just a filter cup and you throw some of that polyfill in there and change that out every so often. Where I ran into issues with that is I'd have to change that quite often, where like a filter sock or a 9x12 sheet can actually last you, depending on how much you feed and stuff, anywhere from like 3 to 7 days. Where with the filter cups, I was having to do it like every 1 to 2 days, which just was a lot of maintenance. So filtration and cleaning are pretty similar. Everything I just said is pretty much, cleaning, especially when I'm talking about cleaning filter socks or something like that. But you're also going to have to clean your glass, right? You're going to have to clean in your tank every so often, clean your pumps and that sort of thing. The easiest way to have some kind of automation there is obviously if there's a natural way with like snails or fish that like to eat the algae that grows there, that's obviously a great way to go. And then specifically what I wanted to mention is just with the Ecotech Marines, since only half of the actual pump gets wet, if you spend the extra money to get an additional wet side, what's nice is you save a lot of time on cleaning, to where when it's time to swap these out, I just put the other wet side in, pull this guy out, put in a little bit of RODI water with some citric acid, any kind of algae, calcium buildup or anything like that dissolves rather quickly, so that when I do actually clean them and take them out of that water, I usually just rinse them off, maybe wipe them down with a microfiber towel, and then they're ready to swap out whenever these get dirty. Saves a lot of time and is very convenient. Alright, so the next big thing that I would automate, and that would be setting up automatic water changes. Doing weekly, bi-weekly, even monthly water changes. Again, it can be easy for a couple weeks, couple months, but after 6 months, it starts to become a chore. What you used to do every single week turns into 2 weeks, turns into 3 weeks, that sort of thing. Again, going back to that stability part of the tank, auto water changes is really, really nice. And I know that's not feasible for everybody, but what's nice is now I'm at the point where I have the Neptune dose doing the water changes every single night. I think it changes out a gallon, maybe a gallon and a half every single night doing that. So consistently the water changes are happening, and I really feel like that brings a lot of stability to the tank. It helps prevent any deficiencies in those like micronutrients. But what's really nice is I know that I'm consistently always doing water changes, and all it really involves for me is when my 100-gallon water reservoir of salt water runs out, I just flip a valve and fill it with fresh water, dump in some salt, mix it up to the right salinity, and then I'm done. And that lasts definitely more than a month. So again, getting back on that once a month schedule for automation, that's a huge crucial thing. But I put that kind of towards the end because I do know that was a lot of work to create that and not feasible for everybody. Now these last two I put after the water changes, and they could go before. It really depends on what kind of tank you have, and that is basically testing and dosing things like alkalinity or calcium, because some people have nothing but soft corals and they don't really ever need to worry about dosing calcium and alkalinity to help those corals build their structure. But if you're dosing by hand a certain amount, again, it's really likely that you'll forget, that you could make a mistake, and just that it won't happen at the same time every week or every day and have that stability, where a dosing machine can do very precise increments at very specific times and help just bring real good stability within your tank. So yeah, I guess you could say I technically dose 4 parts. So I do calcium, alkalinity, magnesium, and then the tropic marin part C. I have the calcium and alkalinity in 2.5-gallon jugs, and then a 5-gallon jug of the tropic marin part C, and I dose equal amounts of the calcium and alkalinity and then an equal amount of the tropic marin part C, if it was 100 here, 100 here, then 200 of the tropical marine part C. Then I also have the magnesium dosing to keep that at a constant level that I refill every so often. But having those huge, large jugs allows it so that I only need to refill them every so often. And even when I do mix up, I mix up large batches, like more than 2.5 gallons. So it's all just mixed up, ready. When these get low, pour in more, and it's way less than once a month of work where I'm just mixing up new solutions. Right now, testing, there's possibly some others out there, but there's basically like two main ones. It's the Trident and can't remember the name, I'll throw it up on the screen, that are going to test certain elements. The Trident, the one I have, it's really only testing calcium, alkalinity, and magnesium. And it's nice that it automatically tests it. It's a little bit of maintenance. I do have to buy new reagents and swap those out every so often. But it's a lot less work than actually testing for alkalinity on a consistent basis. However, I have not automated testing nitrate and phosphate. But once you get your tank to a certain stability, which takes a long time, I can get away with only testing once a month, even though I usually test more and probably should be testing more. But luckily, fingers crossed, knock on wood, testing once a month works okay because I've been able to keep them at a very consistent level. But it's because the automatic water changes. The food I'm feeding same time, same amount every day. Everything is kind of already automated, dialing that in. Okay, so if you were wondering, is it possible to fully automate your tank? I hope that gave some insight, was a little bit helpful. I know when I originally got my tank, that was my thinking. I didn't want to spend the amount of time I saw my friends who are in the hobby spending on it. I'm like, I'm gonna do everything I can to fully automate it. And that was my goal, was to just spend one day a month doing maintenance on my tank. But I will say that doesn't actually happen. All the time I have something come up to where I have to address it, and that's just the nature of the beast. Fairly recently, the outlet controller for my Apex just went haywire and stopped turning off my heaters, so my tank started overheating. And then another outlet went out, which was controlling my auto top off, so I ordered another one, but I also had to drop everything and make sure my tank didn't overheat. Thank goodness I was actually home, I actually saw the alarm on my Apex and didn't let it go too long. That could have been catastrophic. Alright, I appreciate you guys watching. If you got some value, let me know by liking, commenting, or subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one.